The sun rose gently over Bikini Bottom, sending soft waves of golden light drifting through the calm sea. The early morning carried a peaceful hush, as though the ocean itself were still stretching awake in slow, lingering movements. SpongeBob stepped out of his pineapple house with a steady, relaxed breath, feeling the subtle sway of the water around him as he began his quiet walk toward Mrs. Puff's boating school. There was nothing unusual about the day. No special events, no exams, no dramatic twists waiting for him. It was simply another morning marked by the reassuring routine of heading to the open driving lot, of approaching the place where he had spent so many hours learning, failing, trying again, and growing in small, almost invisible ways. The path to the school felt familiar under his feet, coated with the soft texture of sand and shell fragments. He moved slowly, attentive to the muted sounds of the sea. A distant bubbling, the quiet rustle of kelp drifting in lazy currents, the gentle creak of coral structures as they shifted with the tide. SpongeBob felt comforted by these simple sensations, the ones he often overlooked during more hectic mornings. This time, he allowed each one to settle in his mind like tiny, calming reminders of how peaceful Bikini Bottom could be when he truly listened to it. As he approached the school, the open driving lot appeared from behind a cluster of gently swaying kelp stalks. The painted lines on the pavement glowed faintly in the early light, and the orange cones stood perfectly arranged as if patiently waiting for him. He paused at the entrance, taking in the stillness that hung over the entire area. The silence was not intimidating or heavy. It was soft and welcoming, a quiet invitation to ease into the day, without urgency or pressure. The water moved slowly around the lot, stirring small patterns of light across the ground. SpongeBob stepped forward and felt something warm settle in his chest. A steady calm that replaced the usual flutter of nerves he sometimes felt upon arriving. He made his way toward the main building where Mrs. Puff usually prepared for the day's lessons. There was no rush. The school was already gently humming with the early energy of a new day. SpongeBob noticed the small details that he often overlooked: the faint marks on the pavement where hundreds of student boats had passed, the smooth curve of coral railings polished over years, the soft drifting of sand that gradually reshaped the corners of the lot. These details had always been there, but noticing them now brought a sense of grounding he rarely experienced. It felt as though the whole school existed in a slow, rhythmic motion, breathing with the water, breathing with him. He walked closer to the practice boat he often used, resting neatly near the edge of the lot. The sunlight reflected softly off its surface, creating gentle ripples of brightness that danced in calm, measured patterns. SpongeBob approached it like one revisiting an old companion, running his hand along its side with steady, deliberate movements. There was no excitement today, no fear of failing another test or hope of sudden brilliance. Just a quiet acknowledgement that this boat, this lot, this school had been a constant part of his life, shaping his patience, resilience, and determination in ways he hadn't always realized. The driving course lay open before him, free of chaos and noise, a peaceful expanse of lines and gentle curves. SpongeBob stepped onto the course and let the soft texture of the pavement ground him. He walked slowly through the familiar path, the narrow turn, the wide loop, the long stretch leading to the parking box. He had walked this course hundreds of times, but today it felt different. The tranquility made each step feel intentional, as though his body were remembering the pattern of movement without urgency or tension. He noticed how the currents pushed lightly against his body, how the water carried faint echoes of distant activity, how every small detail blended into a serene harmony. Mrs. Puff eventually moved about somewhere inside the building, preparing in her own quiet way. Though SpongeBob did not hear her clearly, only soft movements carried by the water. The peaceful distance allowed him time to settle into himself. He inhaled deeply, letting the calmness expand in his chest like a slow tide, and exhaled with an equally measured release. For once, he wasn't thinking about passing or failing. He wasn't thinking about impressing anyone. He wasn't thinking about mistakes or pressure or expectations. He was simply present. The stillness of the school wrapped around him, making the world feel balanced and gentle. The cones stood firm and bright. The boat waited patiently, and the morning light continued, drifting across the lot in fluid, wavering beams. Everything felt as though it existed in perfect equilibrium, as if the sea were guiding SpongeBob into a rare moment of quiet steadiness. In this silence, he felt something shift softly inside him, a realization that even an ordinary day could carry a sense of peace when he allowed it to. The school, so often associated with frustration or chaotic attempts, now radiated calm reassurance. SpongeBob remained there for a long moment, listening to the faint pulse of life around him. The day had only just begun, and yet he already felt anchored, as though he had stepped into a gentle current that would guide him through the rest of the morning. He stood on the empty lot, surrounded by familiar shapes and soft waterlight, letting the quiet seep into him slowly, effortlessly. It was a simple day, an ordinary day, but it unfolded with a softness that turned every detail into a soothing rhythm. He breathed in, he breathed out, and the calm settled deeper. The morning unfolded slowly across the driving lot, spreading its calmness through every corner of the school grounds. SpongeBob remained near his practice boat, breathing steadily as the muted glow of the ocean drifted across the pavement. The water carried tiny particles of sand that shifted in slow swirls, creating faint patterns that dissolved and reformed in gentle rhythms. He watched them for a moment, letting the motion draw him deeper into the quiet that surrounded him. The day felt unhurried, as though time itself had softened. The school, often filled with small moments of panic and pressure, now felt like a sanctuary. SpongeBob stood at the edge of the course, taking in the gentle curves drawn across the pavement. The narrow stretch he always approached with tension now looked harmless, almost soothing. The painted lines appeared softened by the early light, glowing faintly as they followed their smooth paths around cones and corners. Every line whispered a silent reminder that this space, no matter how intimidating on stressful days, was ultimately just a place to learn, to move, to observe. The water drifted softly against the sides of the boat, creating small ripples that traveled outward until they dissolved into the surrounding calm. SpongeBob traced the boat's outline with his eyes, noticing every curve, every gentle shine on the metal, every small imperfection smoothed over by time and consistent use. The boat had been part of so many attempts, so many resets, so many moments of hope. And despite all the chaos, it remained steady, waiting for him each day without judgment. Today, its quiet presence felt comforting. SpongeBob stepped closer to the open course again, letting the ground guide him. The cones were arranged in deliberate patterns, their bright orange surfaces gently muted in the subdued morning light. They stood like silent guardians of the day's lessons, patient and unchanging. Even from a distance, SpongeBob could feel the steady harmony of the lot. Not a single current swept too quickly. Not a single sound rose above a gentle hum. The environment seemed designed for calm reflection. He wandered toward the far corner of the course where a gentle curve created a looping path. Here, the water was slightly cooler, flowing with a subtle direction that brushed gently against his legs. He let the sensation ground him, feeling its soft insistence that the world moved even when he stood still. The textures of the pavement beneath the water seemed to shift in color as the light changed, transforming from pale gray to deeper tones that reflected the slow drift of the sea above. SpongeBob paused and observed the environment as if seeing it for the first time. The coral structures bordering the lot swayed lightly, each movement deliberate and graceful. Small marine creatures darted between crevices, unaware of the school's purpose and rhythm, simply living in their own gentle cycles. Everything harmonized with everything else. Even the faint creaking of a distant sign seemed to fold into the tranquility of the scene. Bubbles rose from the ground near the edges of the course, drifting upward in lazy spirals, catching light in delicate flashes before dissolving into the play water around him. SpongeBob followed their path with his eyes, feeling his mind soften at the sight. The bubbles seemed to echo his own subtle shift in energy. Slow, fluid, unpressured, he walked toward the center of the lot where the sunlight was strongest. It filtered through the surface in long, unwavering beams that stretched like soft ribbons across the ground. Standing beneath them, SpongeBob felt enveloped in warmth. The heat radiated gently across his shoulders and back, sinking into him in a way that made his breath deepen naturally. His thoughts quieted as each inhale and exhale aligned with the rhythm of the sea. This wasn't a day defined by tests or difficult maneuvers. This was simply a day to exist within the school's quiet space, to reconnect with its layout, to feel comfortable within it rather than overwhelmed. SpongeBob let this idea settle into him, like a slow tide filling the contours of a calm shore. The morning had welcomed him with a softness he hadn't expected, and he allowed himself to lean into it fully. Near the corner of the lot, a faint current shifted, carrying with it the distant smells of ocean plants and salt-softened coral. SpongeBob breathed them in, recognizing the scents as familiar companions from every morning walk he had taken to school over the years. But today, the scents felt different, lighter, gentler, as though filtered through the steady calmness that surrounded him. He walked another slow circle around the lot, each step unhurried. The water moved with him, brushing softly against the pavement as though matching his pace. He noticed how truly silent everything was, how the absence of urgency created a cushion around his mind. Thoughts drifted slowly, gently, like strands of kelp moving in an easy flow. The practice course no longer felt like a challenge to conquer, but rather a space of possibilities. The turns, loops, and stretches of pavement seemed less like obstacles and more like pathways waiting to be filled with calm exploration. SpongeBob felt a subtle anticipation building within him, but not the type that quickened his pulse. It was a quiet eagerness to experience the day fully, to move through the course with awareness rather than anxiety. As he returned to stand beside his boat, he laid a steady hand on its surface again, letting his fingers absorb the coolness of the metal. The boat floated gently, swaying in the faint current, as though encouraging him to join the rhythm. SpongeBob closed his eyes for a long moment and listened to the subtle songs of the sea, to the soft crackle of sand shifting across stone, to the measured pulse of water. All around him, school felt alive in its own serene way, and SpongeBob allowed himself to blend into that serene pulse. He opened his eyes slowly, carrying the calm with him. The day would unfold at its own pace, and SpongeBob felt ready for it, not driven by ambition or fear, but by a gentle desire to be present with each moment of his time at the school. The calm of the driving lot lingered as the minutes drifted forward, unhurried and fluid. SpongeBob remained near his practice boat, enveloped in the gentle stillness of the morning, when a familiar presence began to approach from the far end of the school grounds. Mrs. Puff moved at her usual, steady pace, her silhouette soft against the muted shimmer of the ocean light filtering through the surface above. Her arrival did not disturb the tranquility of the morning. If anything, it seemed to fold naturally into it, as though she were another element of the quiet environment, a calm wave, rolling into shore rather than a sudden intrusion. The soft currents shifted around her as she walked, brushing lightly against the edges of the pavement, creating small ripples that expanded in smooth circles. SpongeBob watched her approach without tension. The sight of her usually carried an undercurrent of nervous energy, but today her presence felt different, grounded, steady, attuned to the same peaceful rhythm that had filled the lot since dawn. She carried a small folder tucked beneath one arm, its edges softened from years of handling, and the gentle sway of it kept time with each of her steps. Mrs. Puff paused for a moment at the entrance of the course, letting her eyes drift across its familiar layout. The lines, the cones, the sun-washed pavement, all seemed to rest under her calm gaze. She stood there quietly, taking in the stillness SpongeBob had been observing all morning, and for a moment, she seemed content simply to breathe in the gentle hush of the environment. The water around her moved in smooth patterns, creating faint spirals that intertwined before slowly fading out. SpongeBob noticed how naturally she blended into the quiet of the lot, as if she were part of its steady rhythm, a presence shaped by countless mornings spent guiding students across these same curves and lines. Her demeanor held a softness that matched the day's slow unfolding. As she stepped closer, the sunlight wove through the water above, casting shifting patterns. On her uniform, the light formed gentle patches that flickered softly across the fabric, appearing and disappearing with each slight tilt of the current. Her steps were measured, grounded, each one creating a small ripple that moved outward along the ground. She stopped a short distance from SpongeBob, her expression thoughtful and attentive as she surveyed the scene. There was no urgency in her posture, no stiffness in her shoulders. Instead, she seemed to breathe in the peacefulness of the morning just as SpongeBob had, letting its calm flow through her in a subtle, restorative way. For a moment, Mrs. Puff simply stood in silence, taking in the familiar boat floating beside SpongeBob. The light caught the side of the vessel, creating a soft gleam that matched the gentle curves of the driving course. She observed the space with the patience of someone who understood that learning had its own natural pace, a rhythm shaped not by pressure, but by readiness. A faint current drifted between them, carrying with it the soft scents of sea salt and coral. Mrs. Puff let it pass over her, then looked out toward the open course once more. Her attention lingered on the narrow turn near the left side of the lot, a curve that had challenged many students before SpongeBob, and many after. But today, even that familiar obstacle seemed softened by the morning's quiet. The water shimmered as she moved slightly to adjust her folder, the gentle motion causing the light to shift across its surface. She placed one hand lightly against the table near the course's start line, grounding herself in the space with practiced ease. Everything she did matched the calm atmosphere, as though she were syncing her own rhythm with the soft pulse of the environment around her. Across the lot, a cluster of small sea plants swayed in a slow, uniform motion. Mrs. Puff observed them briefly, her gaze softening as she recognized the same steady stillness SpongeBob had been absorbing. Her presence held no tension, only a quiet familiarity with the routines of the day ahead. SpongeBob stood nearby, breathing evenly. The calm he had cultivated did not waver with her arrival. Instead, it expanded slightly, as though welcoming another quiet presence into its space. The school grounds felt unified, student, teacher, environment, all connected by the gentle flow of the food, water, and the steady warmth of the sunlight. Mrs. Puff shifted her attention back to SpongeBob. Though she said nothing, there was no need for words in the moment. The morning seemed to encourage silence, asking only for awareness and presence. Her gaze held the subtle reassurance of someone who had witnessed countless attempts, successes and failures alike, and who understood the importance of beginning the day from a place of calm. A soft rustle of sand swept across the pavement as a faint current shifted near the edge of the lot. The sound was delicate, almost melodic, and Mrs. Puff's eyes followed it briefly before returning to the course. She took in a slow, deep breath, allowing the quiet to settle fully around her. The day was ready to begin, not abruptly, not with pressure, but with the same gentle rhythm that had filled the morning. And SpongeBob felt aligned with that rhythm, calm and steady, prepared to step into whatever practice awaited him. The peaceful stillness of the driving lot continued to settle as SpongeBob moved toward the boat with a steady, measured calm. The early light shimmered softly along the hull, creating patterns that appeared and faded across its surface with each subtle shift in the water. Everything around him seemed to move in slow harmony, as though the entire lot were breathing with him. Mrs. Puff stood nearby, her posture relaxed, observing SpongeBob without urgency. She watched as he placed one hand gently on the side of the boat, his touch careful, as though acknowledging the familiar presence of a companion he had spent countless mornings with. SpongeBob took a moment to center himself before stepping into the seat. The movement was smooth, unhurried, guided by a desire not to rush, but to align with the day's tranquil rhythm. The water beneath him shifted just enough to rock the vessel slightly, a soft reminder of the environment's subtle currents. He sat quietly for a few seconds, letting his hands rest on the steering wheel. Its texture, worn in places from repeated attempts, felt familiar and grounding. The boat's quiet hum, a faint vibration that always started when he touched the controls, blended naturally with the broader silence of the lot. Mrs. Puff approached at an easy pace, stopping beside the practice lane. She opened her folder and glanced briefly at the day's outline, though her movements remained calm and unhurried. The turning of the pages created a soft, rhythmic sound that merged gently with the distant rustling of water against the barriers. The course ahead extended in long, smooth curves, each line softened by the morning light. The first section, a wide, forgiving lane, waited with a kind of patient simplicity. SpongeBob breathed in the calm, letting its softness settle into his posture. He adjusted his grip on the wheel, just enough to feel present, not tense. Mrs. Puff lifted her gaze from the folder and gave a single, subtle nod. It was not a command nor a push. It was simply an acknowledgement that SpongeBob could begin when he felt ready. The moment held an openness that allowed SpongeBob to ease forward rather than launch. He gently tapped the ignition, and the boat's motor whispered awake. The hum deepened but remained soft, blending with the rhythm of the surrounding water. SpongeBob allowed the vehicle to glide forward at a slow, steady pace. The boat moved in a smooth line, the water parting around it in calm, uniform waves. The first stretch passed under the boat with an almost meditative flow. SpongeBob kept his eyes steady on the path, his breathing matching the rhythm of the engine's quiet pulse. Every small adjustment of the wheel was deliberate and light, guided less by tension and more by a sense of connection with the course. Mrs. Puff observed in silence, her attention gentle rather than scrutinizing. She watched the waves formed by the boat's passage, soft curves that drifted outward, before dissolving into the wider current. It was a sight she had seen many times, but today it carried a softness that mirrored the morning's peaceful undertone. As SpongeBob approached the first turn, he slowed just a little, allowing the boat to settle into a smoother rhythm. The curve arced gracefully ahead, its boundary markers glowing faintly under the filtered sunlight. He guided the wheel with a steady, fluid motion, letting the boat glide along the line without resistance. The turn unfolded like a slow breath. The boat leaned gently, the water whispering against its sides, and SpongeBob followed the curve with calm focus. When he emerged onto the straight path again, there was no sudden rush or burst of speed, just a gentle continuation of the same quiet pace. The surrounding water shimmered in a serene mosaic of light. The boat drifted forward, unhurried, as though responding more to SpongeBob's inner composure than to the engine itself. Mrs. Puff's expression remained soft, touched by a quiet appreciation for the steady progress unfolding before her. As the first lap neared its end, SpongeBob allowed the boat to slow naturally, letting the motion ease itself into stillness rather than forcing a stop. The vessel settled back into a gentle float, rocking slightly before stabilizing. For a moment, everything was perfectly quiet again. The driving lot returned to its serene stillness, the water smoothing out behind the boat, the gentle current continuing its slow patterns. Mrs. Puff closed her folder with the same calm care with which she had opened it. SpongeBob rested his hands lightly on the wheel, his breathing even, his mind attuned to the quiet satisfaction of a peaceful first lap. The day had only begun, yet its tone already felt shaped by tranquility. The practice would continue, but without rush, without pressure, just a steady unfolding of calm, patient steps. A soft stillness settled over the practice lot after SpongeBob completed his first lap, allowing a gentle pause to unfurl across the space. The water around the boat returned to a smooth, glass-like calm, reflecting the soft glimmers of filtered light drifting down from above. The quiet felt unbroken and whole, as if the morning itself were encouraging a moment of reflection before the next step. Mrs. Puff remained near the edge of the lane, her hands resting lightly on her folder. Her posture carried no tension, only a quiet attentiveness shaped by years of guiding students through the uncertain rhythms of learning. She watched SpongeBob with the same thoughtful calm she had shown all morning, her gaze steady and clear. SpongeBob sat in the boat without moving for several seconds, allowing himself to absorb the feeling of that first lap. His breaths came slowly, evenly, blending with the soft hum of the boat's motor as it rested in idle mode. The wheel felt warm beneath his hands, carrying traces of energy from the gentle movements he had made earlier. That warmth, combined with the smooth weight of the wheel, grounded him. He shifted his attention toward the course in front of him. The lanes extended into a series of soft curves and quiet stretches, shaped more by their gentle flow than by any challenge they might present. The cones stood calmly along the edges, their colors muted under the morning light, creating a steady path that guided the eye. Forward in a continuous line, Mrs. Puff slowly stepped closer to the water, her movement almost ghost-like in its softness. She approached not to correct or instruct, but simply to observe. She knew that some of SpongeBob's most important learning moments happened in these quiet stretches, the moments where he watched, felt, and understood the course with no pressure pulling him forward. SpongeBob let the silence deepen around him, studying the gentle shift of the water and the layout of the next section. He could feel the way the current drifted along one side of the lot, barely noticeable, but present enough to influence the boat's movement during certain turns. He watched the subtle patterns of the surface, noticing how they formed faint ripples against the boundary markings. He allowed his eyes to follow the path of each lane, tracing the lines that curved into one another like flowing streams. The course, which used to feel chaotic and intimidating, now appeared as a calm sequence of shapes and motions, each inviting a different kind of stillness. His mind drifted through the memory of past mistakes, sharp turns taken too quickly, hesitations that caused him to freeze, sudden bursts of nervous energy that sent the boat veering off its path. But today, those memories held no sting, just soft echoes of experiences that had brought him here. To this quiet morning, Mrs. Puff observed SpongeBob's expression, noticing a tranquil focus that had not always been present in his lessons. His gaze carried depth, but not strain, attention, but not urgency. She sensed the internal shift he had undergone over time. The way he had learned to approach the boat, not as an obstacle, but as a companion in motion. The water drifted in small ripples across the lot, shaped by the minor currents moving through the open spaces around them. The faint sounds of the sea in the distance blended with the soft hum of the boat's engine. Everything moved with a peaceful rhythm, slow and unbroken. SpongeBob placed his hand gently on the throttle, not to move yet, but to feel its shape beneath his fingers. It was familiar, grounding, and strangely comforting. He let his eyes close for a moment, allowing the sounds, the sensations, and the energy of the driving lot to settle into him. Mrs. Puff remained silent, recognizing the importance of letting SpongeBob take in the moment. She had guided many students through this course, but few absorbed the environment as deeply as SpongeBob did when he allowed himself to slow down. His connection to the world around him was always sincere, unfiltered, and open to even the smallest details. When SpongeBob opened his eyes again, there was a renewed clarity in them, He lifted his gaze to the second stretch of the course, acknowledging its gentle flow. There was no rush in his mind, no pressure to prove anything, only the intention to continue with the same calm awareness. Mrs. Puff stepped back, slightly, giving him quiet space. She did not gesture or speak. She simply breathed with the moment, letting SpongeBob's observation evolve naturally into readiness. SpongeBob took a deeper breath, allowing its softness to settle through him. The boat rocked faintly beneath him, responding to the small shift in his posture. The course waited ahead, open and peaceful. Everything aligned in the stillness, preparing him not for speed, but for presence. He rested his hand fully on the throttle, still without motion, feeling the connection between his calm intention and the gentle hum of the boat. The morning remained quiet and patient, ready for the next lap. He would begin again soon, but only when the quiet in him and the quiet around him flowed in the same rhythm. The quiet rhythm of the morning continued to cradle the entire driving lot in its soft embrace as SpongeBob prepared for his next lap. Nothing around him seemed to rush. Even the gentle currents beyond the practice barriers drifted with slow, unhurried patterns. The water carried a faint glimmer from the filtered sunlight above, creating a peaceful, shifting mosaic beneath the boat. SpongeBob kept his hand on the throttle, not yet applying pressure, simply resting in a state of gentle anticipation. The calmness that had guided his first lap remained with him, spreading through his chest. And steadying his breath, he looked once more at the stretch of the course ahead, the wide opening lane, the quiet curve beyond it, and the long, straight glide that followed. Everything lay before him with the same soft openness, inviting him to continue whenever he felt ready. Mrs. Puff stood a short distance away, her feet planted lightly on the sand. She held her folder loosely against her side, her attention focused on SpongeBob with a serene patience. She had long understood that each student had their own rhythm, and SpongeBob's was one that responded best to stillness, space, and the slow unfolding of each moment. SpongeBob allowed another breath to fill him deeply, letting its softness settle into his posture. He eased the throttle forward with a delicate touch. The engine responded with a quiet, steady hum that blended naturally with the surrounding sounds of drifting water. The boat began to move, its motion smooth and gradual, the wake behind it forming gentle arcs that spread across the lot. As he advanced into the second lap, SpongeBob kept his gaze soft but attentive, observing the subtle shifts of the boat as it glided through the water. The first stretch carried him forward in a straight line, unbroken and peaceful. He maintained a steady speed, neither increasing nor decreasing, allowing the water to part around the boat in quiet, symmetrical waves. Mrs. Puff watched his movements with a calm appreciation. She noticed how smoothly he held the wheel, how gently he guided the boat along the lane. There was no hint of the nervous energy that had once caused abrupt jerks or sudden bursts of speed. Instead, every gesture seemed rooted in the tranquility that the morning had instilled in him. As SpongeBob approached the first curve, he began, slowing in advance, easing the throttle just enough to let the boat settle into a softer motion. The curve lay ahead like a gentle arc carved into the water, its boundary markers shimmering quietly beneath the light. SpongeBob guided the wheel with a delicate, flowing motion, allowing the boat to lean slightly as it entered the turn. The boat drifted along the curve with a smooth, continuous glide, following the path naturally rather than being pushed through it. SpongeBob felt the subtle resistance of the water, but did not fight it. Instead, he moved with it, adjusting tiny degrees at a time to maintain harmony. The shape of the curve unfolded beneath him like a slow, graceful breath. Mrs. Puff's expression softened as she observed the fluidity of the moment. She had seen SpongeBob struggle with curves countless times before, tight turns that felt overwhelming, sudden corrections that led to spirals or stalls. But today, his movements held a calm precision, shaped not by urgency but by presence. As the boat eased out of the curve and onto the long straightaway, the water ahead stretched into a calm, shimmering corridor. SpongeBob allowed the boat to drift forward with a slightly increased speed. Though still gentle and controlled, the boat cut through the water in a serene path, creating soft ripples that fanned outward before dissolving into the wider current. The surrounding sea remained calm, the sounds distant and muted. The steady pulse of the calm engine blended with the faint hum of the ocean, creating a soft backdrop that supported SpongeBob's concentration. He found a rhythm in the straight path, adjusting only subtly to maintain direction. His awareness expanded, noticing the weight of the wheel, the way the light fell across the wheel, water, the way the boat moved in response to the faint drift of the current. Mrs. Puff continued to observe, appreciating the development of this quiet connection. SpongeBob had always possessed enthusiasm, but moments like this, moments of calm, grounded presence, revealed a different strength, one that had grown slowly and steadily over time. She made no notes, no marks in her folder. She simply watched, letting the morning unfold naturally. The straightway began to narrow slightly toward the end, leading into a second, softer curve. SpongeBob prepared for it by reducing his speed in advance, letting the boat glide into a slower rhythm. He adjusted the wheel with deliberate, gentle motions, allowing the boat to follow the curve's path with the same smoothness as before. The water brushed softly against the hull, creating a quiet, even sound that matched the flow of the turn. Emerging from the final curve, SpongeBob allowed the boat to coast gently forward, the motion slowing naturally as he approached the end of the lap. He eased the throttle back, letting the boat come to a calm, drifting stop. The water settled around him in smooth patterns, gradually quieting until the lot returned to its earlier stillness. The engine rested in a soft idle, the hum fading into the background. SpongeBob released the wheel lightly, letting his hands rest in his lap. A warm sense of quiet satisfaction filled him, not of achievement, but of harmony. Harmony with the boat, with the water, with the quiet morning atmosphere. Mrs. Puff breathed in slowly, appreciating the peaceful completion of the lap. She made no announcement, no evaluation. She simply allowed the moment to exist. The driving lot remained silent and serene. The next steps, waiting patiently, unhurried by time. The practice lot rested in a serene hush as SpongeBob brought the boat to a complete, drifting stillness. The water settled beneath him, smoothing into calm ripples that faded slowly outward, dissolving into the quiet expanse of the course. The filtered sunlight above cast a soft glow across the scene, giving everything a warm, muted clarity. It was the kind of light that encouraged reflection rather than urgency. SpongeBob remained seated for a few moments, letting the calm wash over him. His breathing found a steady rhythm, syncing naturally with the faint hum of the boat's engine, the gentle movement of the water. Each breath felt like an invitation to become more grounded, more connected to the moment unfolding around him. Mrs. Puff stood watching from a short distance, her posture relaxed and steady. She didn't hold her clipboard tightly or position herself as an evaluator. Instead, she simply observed the quiet space between laps, a space she had come to value just as much as the laps themselves. She knew that learning wasn't only about movement. It also lived in these hushed moments where awareness settled and understanding deepened. SpongeBob slowly adjusted his seating position, easing himself back to ensure he felt balanced. The seat's familiar shape supported him, offering a sense of grounding. He placed his hands lightly on the wheel, not gripping it, but simply resting there, as though acknowledging the connection between himself and the boat. The water around the vessel lifted and fell in small, rhythmic motions, nudging the boat in gentle pulses. SpongeBob let the sensation anchor him, These subtle shifts reminded him of the delicate dance between steering and sensing, between action and observation. In past lessons, he had often overlooked these nuances, focusing too intensely on the goal of completing the course. Now, however, he allowed every tiny detail to inform him. Mrs. Puff stepped a little closer, though still maintaining a respectful distance. Her footsteps on the sandy bottom created soft, muffled sounds that dissolved quickly into the surrounding water. She looked at SpongeBob with calm assurance, recognizing the quiet readiness that had settled into his posture. SpongeBob took another slow breath, letting it deepen in his chest before releasing it gently. He shifted his attention back to the SpongeBob course, studying the next set of lanes. This section was slightly narrower than the earlier ones, lined with cones, placed a bit closer together. In the past, these tighter formations had been a source of stress, areas where sudden turns and quick reactions were needed. But today, they appeared different to him. Instead of seeing obstacles, he saw shapes of flow, pathways that curved naturally, inviting attention rather than fear. He adjusted the angle of the mirror on his left side with a careful motion, aligning it with the lane behind him. The mirror reflected the shimmering water, the empty stretch of the lot, and the faint glow of morning light. He checked the mirror on the right, ensuring it captured the same clarity. These adjustments were minor, yet they carried a quiet significance. Small acts of preparation that set the tone for everything that followed. Mrs. Puff noticed the precision in his movements, the calm deliberateness behind each adjustment. There was no frantic energy, no anxious rush. Instead, there was intention, shaped by the stillness of the morning and the slow pace of their practice. SpongeBob reached for the throttle again, this time only to rest his fingers against it. He didn't push forward immediately. Instead, he let his fingertips feel the surface, grounding himself in the subtle texture and the faint warmth left by the earlier laps. The contact reminded him of the trust he was beginning to build. Trust in himself, trust in the boat, and trust in the steady process of learning. He allowed his gaze to drift along the waterline, noticing the slight movements of the surface as it responded to distant currents. The water near the cones shifted in small patterns, each movement gentle and rhythmic. SpongeBob watched these patterns without pressure, allowing them to guide his understanding of the environment. The boat rocked gently beneath him in response to his shifting posture. He absorbed the movement without tense correction, letting it pass through him like a wave of soft reassurance. Everything in the lot, the boat, the water, the course, even his own body, seemed aligned in a state of quiet readiness. Mrs. Puff turned her gaze briefly toward the next section of the course, assessing the lane ahead. She knew that this part required subtle control and smooth adjustments, skills SpongeBob had been slowly developing throughout the morning. Yet she also recognized that his growing calmness was becoming just as important as his steering. SpongeBob blinked slowly, letting his eyes soften as he prepared himself mentally. The moment to unfold naturally. He felt the familiar presence of the wheel beneath his hands, the gentle vibration of the engine through the seat, the quiet pulse of the water against the hull. All of it worked together to form a calm foundation. He lifted one hand briefly to adjust his posture. Again, settling his shoulders and finding a comfortable alignment. The gesture was small, but intentional, a way of signaling to himself that he was ready to continue. Mrs. Puff offered a subtle nod once more, not as a command, but as an acknowledgement of the readiness she sensed. It was a soft cue that SpongeBob could move forward whenever he chose. SpongeBob inhaled deeply, letting the calm settle fully inside him. His fingers tightened ever so slightly around the throttle. The moment before motion felt weightless, balanced perfectly between stillness and flow. And then, with gentle confidence, he prepared to begin the next phase of his practice. The quiet anticipation in the air felt almost like a soft current as SpongeBob eased the throttle forward, letting the boat glide into motion once again. The hum of the engine rose just slightly, blending with the calm pulse of the surrounding water. The morning still held its peaceful glow, and every ripple across the surface seemed to move with deliberate gentleness, as though mirroring the rhythm he had settled into. The boat drifted toward the next section of the course, the narrower lanes where the cones stood closer together, forming pathways that required smoother adjustments and steadier attention. SpongeBob had approached this area countless times in past lessons, often with the excitement of possibility intertwining with the nervousness of challenge. Today, however, something felt different. The lane no longer seemed to loom over him like a test. Instead, it appeared to stretch forward quietly, waiting without judgment or urgency. Mrs. Puff remained at the edge of the course, her posture straight yet relaxed, her gaze following SpongeBob's slow progression. She held her clipboard lightly, but she didn't lift it to mark anything down. Her focus was not on evaluation, but on the unfolding of the experience itself. She watched the boat move into the narrow entrance with a gentle attentiveness, recognizing that this moment was less about technique and more about presence. SpongeBob kept the throttle at a low, steady level. The boat moved just fast, enough to maintain a clear sense of direction, yet slow enough for him to absorb every subtle shift in the water beneath him. The first few feet of the narrow lane guided him between two rows of cones, their muted colors shimmering softly under the filtered light. The path felt calm, enclosed just enough to create a sense of focus without confinement. He adjusted the wheel slightly, not a sharp movement, but a small, deliberate turn that nudged the boat into alignment with the center of the lane. The water responded with a smooth glide, its surface breaking gently around the hull. SpongeBob felt the delicate feedback of the boat's motion through his hands, a subtle reminder that every movement mattered, yet none needed to be rushed. As he advanced deeper into the lane, the gentle pressure of the water changed slightly, influenced by the shape of the course and the soft current that drifted between the cones. SpongeBob sensed the shift before he fully understood it, responding with a minor adjustment to the wheel. The boat corrected its path almost immediately, gliding back into the center with quiet ease. Mrs. Puff watched these adjustments with a calm sense of appreciation. She observed how SpongeBob's movements were no longer reactions, but gentle responses. He was not trying to outmaneuver the boat or the course. He was moving with them, attuned to the subtle sensations they offered. These moments of natural flow, she knew, were some of the most valuable in any lesson. The narrow lane curved slightly to the right, its shape smooth and gradual. SpongeBob anticipated the shift, not by rushing into the turn, but by letting his awareness drift into it gently. He eased the wheel into the curve with a steady hand, guiding the boat along the arc with patience. The gentle tilt of the boat felt almost like a calm embrace from the water, supporting him as he moved. The cones on either side passed slowly, their forms drifting by in soft motion. SpongeBob's eyes followed the path ahead without tension, taking in the curve and the straight stretch that awaited beyond it. His breathing remained steady, grounded in the tranquil flow of the moment. As he emerged from the turn, the lane narrowed just a little more, requiring careful alignment. SpongeBob made another minor adjustment, his fingers moving lightly across the wheel. The boat responded faithfully, staying on course without resistance. The subtle satisfaction of this harmony eased into him, filling the space where stress once lived. Mrs. Puff took a single quiet step back, giving the moment a kind of respectful stillness. She understood the significance of these narrow lanes, how they tested not just control, but the ability to remain calm and trusting in movement. SpongeBob had once approached this section with bursts of panic or overcorrection, but now his presence flowed smoothly, shaped by the calmness of the day. The narrowest part of the course came into view, a short stretch where the cones stood so close that the lane resembled a thin ribbon of clear space. Yet SpongeBob felt no tension. Instead, he breathed slow and deep, aligning the boat carefully before entering. His hands remained steady, his shoulders relaxed, his gaze soft but focused. The boat slipped into the tight passage with grace, the hull barely creating a whisper of motion as it moved. Every sensation felt clear and gentle. The water pressing lightly against the sides, the faint vibrations of the motor, the soft glow of underwater light reflecting off the cones. SpongeBob held the wheel with balanced confidence, making the smallest adjustments to maintain his path. A brief moment of complete harmony settled in. The boat centered perfectly, the water calm, the lane precise, the movement fluid. It was a simple stretch of practice, yet it carried a quiet beauty that SpongeBob absorbed fully. When the lane widened slightly near the end, SpongeBob allowed his hold on the wheel to loosen a little. He guided the boat forward until it drifted out of the narrow section and into an open space once more. The water spread out around him, no longer confined by cones, and the freedom of the broader area felt soothing. Mrs. Puff let out a small, nearly unnoticeable breath of appreciation. The moment had unfolded with a softness that encapsulated the essence of the entire morning. Calm movement, thoughtful presence, and gentle progress. SpongeBob slowed the boat to a quiet stop, letting the water settle again. The ripples drifted outward in slow, fading lines, blending back into the stillness that had shaped the day. He rested his hands on the wheel, feeling a soft sense of connection to everything around him. The narrow lanes were behind him now, but the calm they had given him lingered, steady, peaceful, and quietly transformative. The water lay almost motionless, its surface so smooth it looked like a sheet of softly tinted glass. After completing the narrow lanes, SpongeBob let the boat drift to a gentle stop in the open training area. The quiet felt different here, broader, lighter, yet still carrying the same delicate calm that had shaped the morning. For a moment, SpongeBob simply sat with his hands resting lightly on the wheel. He wasn't thinking about the next maneuver or worrying about what Mrs. Puff might say. He wasn't rushing to prove anything to himself. He was just here, present, floating at the prize center of a peaceful stretch of ocean that felt as soothing as the hush of a deep breath. Mrs. Puff approached at a relaxed pace, her steps slow and deliberate as she came to stand beside the water's edge. Her expression carried a softness that SpongeBob rarely noticed during driving lessons, an appreciation for the stillness that had settled over the moment. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she let the silence breathe, understanding instinctively that breaking it too soon would disrupt the gentle rhythm SpongeBob had found. SpongeBob inhaled deeply, feeling the air fill him with quiet clarity. The boat rocked only slightly, the faintest nudge of the water beneath. Each small movement felt unhurried, natural, and grounding. The art of being still, really still, was something SpongeBob had rarely explored. His days were usually filled with bursts of enthusiasm, rapid thoughts, energetic motions, and lively distractions. Yet here, surrounded by calm water and open space, he found himself easing into a quiet he didn't know he needed. Mrs. Puff finally spoke, her voice low and warm. "Take a moment to let the boat settle with you," she said. "Feel how it rests in the water." SpongeBob nodded gently and shifted his focus. He wasn't trying to control the boat or direct it. Instead, he simply observed how the hull responded to tiny currents, how the engine's faint vibration hummed in the background, how the air felt cool against his face. He closed his eyes for a few seconds. No pressure, no cones, no expectations, just the quiet. The boat drifted slightly, then steadied. Mrs. Puff continued, "Driving isn't only about motion. It's also about understanding the moments between movements, the pauses, the breath, the stillness. SpongeBob let her words settle inside him. They felt different from the usual instructions about steering angles or braking distances. These words felt grounding, like something he'd carry outside the course into his everyday life. He opened his eyes and watched the small ripples around the boat slowly soften. The reflection of the sky shimmered faintly on the surface, drifting and settling with each passing second. Inside the quiet, SpongeBob felt a growing sense of alignment with the world around him. Not the exaggerated excitement he often felt, but a peaceful, gentle kind of happiness. One that filled him from the chest outward, warm and steady. Mrs. Puff stepped closer to the water's edge. "Let your mind rest like the water," she said. "And, when you're ready, we'll continue." SpongeBob took one last slow breath, letting the stillness expand before gradually drawing the throttle back to life. The boat responded with a soft hum, rising in volume just enough to signal the return to motion. But he didn't rush. He let the boat move slowly, very slowly, still carrying that sense of calm with him. The peaceful pause had become part of him, woven into his movements. As he began drifting forward, leaving the quiet circle behind, SpongeBob realized something small but meaningful. Moments of stillness weren't empty pauses. They were part of the journey, and this lesson, gentle and unspoken, might have been one of the most important he'd ever learned. The soft hum of the engine blended seamlessly with the quiet rhythm of the water as SpongeBob guided the boat forward once more. Each movement was measured, almost ceremonial in its pace. The morning sunlight streamed through the water above, casting a warm, gentle glow across the course, highlighting the faint ripples left by his previous laps. Everything felt deliberate, yet effortless, as though time itself had slowed to match his calm. Ahead lay a gentle curve, broader than the narrow lanes, but still requiring attention. It was the kind of turn SpongeBob had struggled with in the past, moments when his excitement had made him overcorrect, or when nerves had caused abrupt jerks of the wheel. Today, however, he approached it with a different mindset. This was not a challenge to conquer but a rhythm to follow, a subtle path that asked only for presence. Mrs. Puff watched from the side, her hands resting lightly on her clipboard. She observed not for errors or achievements but to witness the quiet evolution of SpongeBob's understanding. There was a softness in his approach, a trust in the boat's response, a gentle flow that spoke of internal growth rather than technical mastery alone. SpongeBob slowed the boat slightly before entering the curve, allowing the water to carry him through. He leaned just enough into the turn to feel the natural pull, guiding the wheel in small, fluid movements. The boat responded perfectly, gliding along the curve as though it had anticipated his touch. The cones marking the edges stood like silent witnesses, their muted colors blending softly with the shimmering water. As he advanced through the turn, SpongeBob's awareness expanded to every subtle sensation. The faint vibration beneath his seat, the whisper of water brushing against the hull, the slight sway from the gentle currents. All of it merged into a harmonious feedback loop that guided his hands and eyes. He didn't force the boat. He let it move with him. The curve eased into a straight stretch, and SpongeBob allowed the throttle to slide forward gradually. The boat glided smoothly, its motion steady and predictable. The open space offered a sense of freedom, yet SpongeBob remained mindful, his attention calm and present. He observed the reflections on the water, the subtle shifts in light, and the almost imperceptible tilt of the course beneath him. Mrs. Puff remained nearby, her expression quiet and approving. She knew the importance of these small, careful adjustments, moments where control was not imposed but cultivated. SpongeBob's approach to the gentle turn demonstrated a maturing awareness, a deepening harmony with the environment that could not be measured by speed or lap times. The end of the curve approached, marked by a faint widening in the lane. SpongeBob's hands continued to guide the wheel with soft precision, maintaining alignment without effort. The boat's glide carried him forward, effortlessly, the motion smooth and steady. A faint ripple followed the hull, dissipating slowly into the surrounding water, as if marking the passage of a calm, deliberate moment. He felt a quiet satisfaction in this mastery. Not a prideful thrill, but a gentle acknowledgement of growth. The lesson was not in conquering the turn, but in understanding it, feeling the natural motion, respecting the subtle feedback, and responding with mindful presence. It was a lesson that extended beyond the course, into every facet of calm attention and gentle awareness. Mrs. Puff allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to form. She had guided many students through this curve, but few approached it with such fluidity and tranquility. SpongeBob had transformed his earlier struggles into a serene partnership with the boat. Each movement, guided by quiet intention, rather than hurried correction. The straight stretch, following the curve, provided a natural pause. SpongeBob eased the throttle back, letting the boat drift for a moment. As the gentle hum of the engine softened, the reflections on the water shimmered with delicate ripples, creating a pattern of light that seemed to breathe with the moment. Everything felt in balance, connected in a seamless flow of awareness and calm. SpongeBob rested his hands lightly on the wheel, breathing in the peaceful morning air. The boat remained steady beneath him, the water around him perfectly still. The gentle turn was behind him, its lesson carried inward, shaping the quiet rhythm of his mind and body. Mrs. Puff watched silently, knowing that each small achievement of presence and alignment was more important than any technical perfection. SpongeBob's understanding was unfolding naturally, guided by patience, awareness, and a deepening trust in the subtle partnership between student and boat. The boat remained calm, the morning still, and SpongeBob felt the continuation of a quiet journey, each gentle turn a step in a rhythm that would carry him further than speed alone ever could. After completing the gentle turn, SpongeBob allowed the boat to glide onto the long, open straightaway. The water stretched before him like a glassy ribbon, reflecting the soft sunlight in rippling, golden patterns. The morning had settled into a gentle rhythm, the quiet hum of the boat blending seamlessly with the subtle whispers of the surrounding currents. SpongeBob felt the ease of motion in every part of his body. His hands rested lightly on the wheel, his shoulders relaxed, and his gaze softened to take in the stretch of water ahead. There was no urgency, no need to accelerate or force movement. The straightaway invited him to observe, to feel, and to breathe with the flow of the boat beneath him. Mrs. Puff lingered at the edge of the course, her posture calm and patient. She noticed the subtle changes in SpongeBob's approach, how he moved with the boat instead of against it, how he sensed the faint resistance of the water and responded with quiet adjustments. These moments, she knew, held more value than the visible markers of success. They revealed an inner calm, a growing confidence rooted in presence rather than performance. SpongeBob took a deep breath, letting it expand slowly through his chest before releasing it. Each exhale seemed to ripple outward, carrying a sense of balance and quiet energy through his movements. The straightaway allowed him the space to find a natural rhythm, a steady glide that required no corrections, only gentle attention. The boat moved forward with a smooth, uninterrupted motion. SpongeBob noticed the delicate dance of light on the water's surface, the way the reflections shifted with each subtle tilt of the hull. The cones marking the course blurred gently in the distance, almost dissolving into the soft patterns of light and water. Each moment felt suspended in time, a quiet meditation in motion. Mrs. Puff observed his posture, the slight adjustments of his hands, and the serene focus in his eyes. She knew that mastery was not measured by speed or perfection, but by harmony with the course and the environment. SpongeBob had begun to embody that harmony, his attention flowing effortlessly between control and surrender, motion and stillness. As the straightaway continued, SpongeBob allowed the boat to drift with minimal input, feeling the natural sway of the water beneath him. He noticed the subtle differences in pressure on the wheel as the current shifted, making minute adjustments with gentle precision. Each micro-movement was a dialogue between himself and the boat, a quiet understanding that required no words. The stillness of the moment carried a meditative quality. Time seemed to stretch, the passage of distance becoming a fluid experience rather than a measurement of progress. SpongeBob's mind remained clear, focused yet unburdened, attuned to the gentle feedback of the boat and the environment around him. Mrs. Puff stepped a little closer, though her movements remained slow and unobtrusive. She understood that SpongeBob's calm presence was more important than any instruction she could offer at this point. Her role was not to correct but to witness, to provide a stable presence as he deepened his awareness and control. SpongeBob noticed a faint breeze across the water, its coolness brushing against him softly. He tilted the boat slightly to feel the subtle interaction of wind and water, enjoying the sensation without urgency. Every movement was deliberate, conscious, yet effortlessly smooth. The straightaway began to gradually widen, signaling the approach of the next gentle curve. SpongeBob did not rush. He continued to glide forward, maintaining the serene rhythm he had cultivated. His hands remained soft on the wheel, ready for the small, mindful adjustments the curve would require. Mrs. Puff's eyes softened as she observed him. She knew that the calm he carried here was the foundation for all future challenges. The straightaway had become a space of reflection, a corridor of quiet confidence that reinforced everything he had learned so far. SpongeBob breathed deeply again, feeling the balance of body and mind, the harmony of motion and stillness. He understood that this calm, continuous stretch was not just practice. It was an integral part of his journey, a moment to internalize patience, presence, and gentle mastery. The boat continued to glide forward, steady and sure, carrying SpongeBob in a quiet, flowing rhythm that felt both natural and endlessly peaceful. The long straightaway began to soften as the outline of the second gentle curve came into view. SpongeBob felt a quiet anticipation, not tension, but a readiness grounded in the calm rhythm he had cultivated. The water ahead shimmered with the morning light, and the gentle hum of the engine merged seamlessly with the subtle sway of the currents. SpongeBob eased the throttle slightly, allowing the boat to glide forward with a steady, controlled pace. The curve was wider than the narrow lanes he had practiced earlier, but it required careful attention nonetheless. Each movement needed to be smooth, deliberate, and responsive to the natural flow of the water. He adjusted his grip on the wheel just enough to feel the subtle feedback of the hull beneath him. Mrs. Puff stood nearby, her gaze soft but observant. She had long learned to trust in moments like these, moments where a student moved with awareness and presence rather than hurried calculation. SpongeBob's calm confidence filled the space, shaping the water around him with quiet influence. As the boat approached the curve, SpongeBob began to guide the wheel gently, allowing the natural arc of the lane to carry the boat. The motion was slow, controlled, and elegant. He leaned slightly into the turn, letting the boat respond without forcing it. Matching his awareness to the subtle undulations beneath the hull, the gentle sway of the water created a rhythm, a flowing pulse that SpongeBob followed instinctively. The cones marking the edges of the curve shimmered softly in the morning light, and he allowed them to guide his adjustments without imposing force. Each shift of the wheel, each slight tilt, was in harmony with the surrounding environment, creating a seamless glide. Mrs. Puff's eyes softened as she observed. She knew the importance of such a curve, not just for skill, but for patience and awareness. Here, The student who had once struggled with even minor turns now moved with a quiet mastery born of mindful presence. SpongeBob continued through the curve, feeling the subtle forces of the curve, water, and the boat's natural responses. His breathing remained steady, each inhale and exhale synchronizing with the gentle sway of the boat. There was no rush, no thought of laps remaining or mistakes past. Only the motion, only the calm, only the flowing rhythm of presence. As the curve began to ease, leading back into a straight path, SpongeBob maintained a delicate balance. He allowed the boat to settle into the new direction, softening his grip on the wheel, while keeping the motion smooth and even. The water rippled quietly, following the gentle passage of the hull, and the sunlight, reflected in fleeting, soft patterns along the surface. The straight stretch after the curve felt like a continuation of the calm journey, a corridor of tranquility where SpongeBob could observe and internalize the harmony he had cultivated. His confidence grew quietly, not as a burst of excitement, but as a steady awareness of his own rhythm and the boat's responsiveness. Mrs. Puff remained at the edge of the course, giving SpongeBob space while providing the subtle reassurance of her presence. She understood that this gentle curve, like the rest of the course, was part of a larger lesson in observation, alignment, and patience. SpongeBob allowed the final moments of the curve to drift into stillness as he moved back into the open straightaway. He rested his hands lightly on the wheel, feeling the gentle flow of the water beneath him and the subtle pulse of the boat. The motion was quiet, unhurried, and entirely his own. As he floated forward, leaving the second curve behind, SpongeBob carried with him a sense of mastery that went beyond technique. It was the mastery of presence, of patience, of gentle awareness. Every breath, every shift of the wheel, and every subtle tilt of the hull had contributed to a deeper understanding, one that was as much about inner calm as it was about driving skill. The water spread out before him, vast and inviting, reflecting the soft morning light. SpongeBob felt the steady beat of the boat beneath him, a rhythm that was now inseparable from his own quiet confidence. He had moved through the curve not with urgency or force, but with harmony and patience, a lesson in gentle mastery that would carry him forward through every lap to come. The morning had stretched into a soft, luminous calm as SpongeBob approached the last section of the course. The gentle glow of the water reflected a world that seemed paused, as if waiting in quiet anticipation for the final movements. Here, the combination of straightaways and curves culminated, inviting reflection as much as skill. Every lap, every careful adjustment, and every breath had led to this gentle finale. SpongeBob eased the throttle forward with subtle control, feeling the familiar hum of the engine beneath him. The water responded to his touch, ripples forming faint patterns that mirrored the quiet rhythm he had embraced all morning. There was no need to hurry. The final challenge was not about speed but about continuity, presence, and the seamless integration of everything he had learned. Mrs. Puff stood at the edge, her expression calm yet attentive. She observed, without interference, understanding that the last section was both a test and a meditation, a space where SpongeBob's growing awareness would be most evident. The course curved and straightened in gentle succession, requiring steady attention, subtle adjustment, and careful anticipation. As the boat entered the first curve of the final stretch, SpongeBob allowed his senses to guide him. He felt the hull respond to each minor tilt, the currents whispering subtle guidance as the boat moved forward. The cones marking the lane were no longer obstacles but gentle signals, each offering a quiet cue for adjustment. His hands moved smoothly on the wheel, each movement intentional, yet unforced, creating a fluid dialogue with the boat. The straight section that followed invited observation. SpongeBob let the boat drift at a measured pace, feeling the balance between control and surrender. The sunlight shimmered on the water, and the reflections became a kind of soft meditation, each ripple echoing the calm mastery he had cultivated. There was no thought of past mistakes, no pressure to excel, only a steady presence in motion. The next curve demanded subtle coordination, and SpongeBob responded with the gentle precision he had been refining. The boat tilted slightly, guided by minute adjustments. As he navigated the path with grace, he felt the water beneath him, the faint vibration of the engine, and the soft sway of the hull as an interconnected system, each element harmonizing with his steady attention. The curve felt less like a challenge and more like an extension of the flow he had inhabited all morning. Mrs. Puff's eyes softened as she observed, recognizing the transformation in her student. Where once SpongeBob had approached curves with frantic corrections and anxious energy, he now moved through them with calm deliberation, fully attuned to the boat and the water. His presence had become the guiding force. Emerging from the curve, SpongeBob entered the final straightaway. He let the boat glide smoothly, maintaining gentle control while allowing the natural flow to carry him. The water reflected a clear, serene morning, the light catching the subtle ripples left in the boat's passage. Each movement of the wheel was minimal, precise, and harmonious, a quiet testament to the progression of his morning lessons. The final cones appeared, marking the end of the course. SpongeBob adjusted slightly, guiding the boat to a smooth stop. The engine's hum faded into a soft stillness, leaving only the gentle lapping of water against the hull. The entire course, with its curves and straightaways, narrow lanes, and open stretches, now lay behind him. A collection of lessons that had been as much about calm presence as about driving skill. Mrs. Puff approached with a faint, approving smile. There were no words of critique necessary. The demonstration of patient mastery spoke louder than any instruction. SpongeBob rested his hands on the wheel, feeling a deep, quiet satisfaction. The final challenge had been completed, not through haste or pressure, but through gentle awareness, careful attention, and the soft harmony of movement and stillness. The morning sunlight shifted slightly across the water, highlighting the water, reflection of the course, and the boat in a way that seemed almost ceremonial. SpongeBob allowed himself a moment to absorb it, feeling the rhythm of the lesson settle within him. The calm, deliberate flow he had cultivated throughout the day was now fully realized. A quiet victory, woven into every motion, every breath, and every gentle adjustment. For SpongeBob, the final challenge had been less a test and more a celebration, a reflection of growth, patience, and the serene joy of mastering not just the course, but the quiet art of being present. The boat rested quietly, its hull barely moving against the gentle lapping of the water. SpongeBob leaned back slightly, allowing his hands to drift from the wheel, his body softened by the culmination of the morning's lessons. The course, with its twists, turns, and narrow lanes, lay behind him, reflected on the still surface like a delicate watercolor painting. Every ripple seemed to echo the rhythm of his own breath. He looked around at the soft morning light glinting on the water, at the serene expanse of open space, and felt a quiet sense of completeness. The lessons had been more than maneuvers and control. They had been about presence, patience, and the subtle art of movement. The water carried the memory of each curve, each straightaway, each delicate adjustment, and SpongeBob sensed how each moment had shaped him. Mrs. Puff stood a few paces away, her figure reflected faintly on the water's surface. She did not speak immediately. She understood that SpongeBob's reflections were his own, that this pause was as important as any active instruction. The quiet presence of teacher and student created a shared stillness, a moment of calm communion with the water. SpongeBob closed his eyes for a few seconds, letting the sensations of the morning wash over him. The gentle tilt of the hull, the soft hum of the engine fading, the faint warmth of the sunlight, all of it became part of a singular experience. Each memory of movement, now intertwined with stillness, creating a rhythm that resonated deep within him. He thought of the narrow lanes, how he had approached them with cautious focus, how each turn had once seemed daunting but had gradually become an expression of gentle mastery. He recalled the straightaways, their calm expanses giving him space to breathe and observe. And the final curves, the culmination of effort and presence, had flowed seamlessly into quiet reflection. The water mirrored his thoughts, soft ripples extending outward, fading into smooth clarity. The lesson, he realized, was not about perfection or the avoidance of mistakes, but about the cultivation of awareness. The harmony between boat and body, mind and movement, was a gentle victory in itself. SpongeBob felt a warm sense of gratitude for this quiet morning, for the patient guidance of Mrs. Puff, and for the opportunity to move through the course with mindful care. A gentle breeze stirred across the water, brushing against SpongeBob's face, carrying the subtle scent of the ocean. He inhaled slowly, savoring the calm, letting it expand through him, filling every corner of awareness. In this quiet space, there was no pressure, no expectation, only the simple acknowledgement of presence and the gentle satisfaction of a lesson absorbed in its entirety. Mrs. Puff finally spoke, her voice low and kind. "Well done, SpongeBob. You've learned more than just driving today. You've learned the art of being here, fully." SpongeBob smiled softly, his eyes still closed, letting her words sink in. He felt the truth in them, not a lesson written in words, but a lesson felt in every shift of the wheel, every careful turn, and every pause of stillness. The morning had become more than a practice session. It had been an exploration, a journey, a meditation. In motion, the boat remained at rest, yet SpongeBob felt it moving within him, a quiet momentum of calm, presence, and understanding that would carry beyond the course. The water reflected this balance, still and gentle, shimmering like a promise of serenity in motion. The morning had softened into a gentle glow, the lights spilling across the water in warm, liquid streaks. SpongeBob eased the boat from its resting place, allowing it to glide forward slowly. The engine purred softly beneath him, blending with the subtle whisper of currents. Each movement felt like an extension of the calm he had cultivated, a continuation of the quiet awareness that had carried him through the course. The path home from the driving course was familiar, yet now held a deeper resonance. Every ripple of water seemed to echo the lessons of the day, the harmony between motion and stillness, the understanding that true mastery was as much about patience and presence as about technique. SpongeBob's hands rested lightly on the wheel, guiding the boat without effort, feeling the gentle feedback of the hull beneath him. He thought of the narrow lanes, the careful attention required for each turn, and the straightaways that had offered space to breathe and reflect. Each element of the course had contributed to a quiet rhythm that now flowed through him naturally. He was no longer merely moving through the exercises. He was moving with them, in harmony with the water, the boat, and the stillness that had become part of his own rhythm. Mrs. Puff had accompanied him at a distance, her calm presence a silent reassurance rather than instruction. SpongeBob noticed her occasional nod or gentle smile as he navigated the familiar channels, appreciating the subtle guidance she offered without interference. Her patience had shaped the morning, and now her presence underscored the quiet confidence that SpongeBob carried forward. As he glided past familiar landmarks, the soft shimmer of coral, the swaying seaweed, the distant outlines of underwater hills, SpongeBob felt a sense of completion. The lessons of the course had transformed into something lasting, a rhythm, a presence, a gentle awareness that extended beyond the boundaries of any practice lane. The journey home was not simply a return, it was the continuation of a day steeped in calm, understanding. The water around him reflected the morning sky, gentle blues mingling with hints of gold. The boat moved with quiet grace, each subtle adjustment a testament to SpongeBob's growing mastery. He felt a smile curve across his face, soft and unhurried, as he allowed himself to appreciate the quiet joy of movement and the serene beauty of the ocean. He realized that the day's lessons were not confined to the driving course. They were lessons in patience, in presence, and in finding the gentle flow within every challenge, even beyond this morning, in the bustling chaos of daily life. He could carry this quiet understanding, the art of being fully present, of moving with care and mindfulness. The final stretch of the journey brought him back to the dock, where the gentle lapping of water against the pier marked the end of this particular adventure. SpongeBob brought the boat to a slow, smooth stop, resting his hands lightly on the wheel. The engine hummed softly, then quieted entirely, leaving only the serene sounds of the ocean around him. Mrs. Puff approached, her expression calm and approving. No words were needed. The quiet mastery, the gentle presence, the soft rhythm that had guided SpongeBob through the morning, spoke volumes on its own. They shared a silent acknowledgement, a reflection of the journey completed together. SpongeBob stepped from the boat, feeling the gentle sway of the dock beneath him and the lingering calm of the boat. Water. The lessons of the day had become part of him, woven into his movements, his breath, and his awareness. The quiet journey home was not merely a conclusion. It was the beginning of a new rhythm, a gentle, enduring understanding that would accompany him through every lane, every curve, and every moment beyond the driving course. And as he walked back toward the familiar streets of Bikini Bottom, the soft light of the morning glinting off the water, SpongeBob carried with him the quiet confidence of one who had moved not just through the course, but into a deeper harmony with the world around him. A serene rhythm that would continue, softly and steadily, with every step he took.